Welcome.
I thought today we'd revisit the Amiga 1200 Maxi powered by the A500 Mini, because this project excited me perhaps more than any other recent one that we've done. Not only does it obviously look gorgeous, but I realized it had inadvertently solved a lot of the things that were wrong with my real Amiga, but not just my Amiga. See, for the longest time, I've been an advocate of only using real hardware instead of emulators where possible. But over the 4 years that I've been running this channel, including a year of playing C64 games for Zap64 reviews, I've come to realize a sort of subconscious aversion I seem to be developing to some old hardware. I mean, almost every time I switch these machines on to film, they seem to have one problem or another. My main C64 recently had a failed VIC chip, a problem the newer Ultimate 64 obviously is immune to, and I've been using that more as a result. The Apple IIe currently has a mystery startup error that I haven't had time to fix yet, something again my RetroPie Apple IIe installation doesn't suffer from, perhaps obviously. The Apple Macintosh screen image seems to flicker more and more lately, probably another dry solder joint, so I have to open that up and fix that. Though, to be fair, the Atari 400 and Amstrad PCW are soldering on beautifully. Too much soldering on my mind. But this Amiga, well, I shared fairly recently the most bizarre issue I've had with the caps lock key flashing all different combinations of error message and the keyboard stopping working at the same time. And how I then replaced the keyboard with 3 different keyboards, then I replaced the chips, then I replaced the entire motherboard and the power supply, until I realized I'd replaced the entire computer and the same fault was happening. I've managed to fix most faults in my time, but this one has defeated me, I have to say. And since then I've also tried things including Diag-ROM, which gave no real answers. I mean, it is possible the Amiga just doesn't like my studio's electrical mains wiring. So today we're going to rip out all the electrical wiring out of all the walls. No, just kidding, of course. We have to draw the line somewhere. And that's really the point here. I've kind of started to draw a line. But you know, even when that error isn't happening, the Amiga has its other frustrations. It also relies on those 2 HDMI outputs and a switch box, which has a bit of a delay when it's switching screen modes. And whilst it's cool that we solved that using that auto switcher, it is admittedly a bit cumbersome. And even then, interlaced screen modes still flicker like they always did, which is nostalgic, if a bit migraine-inducing. The Vampire 500 version 2 Plus, well, that's been discontinued and stopped receiving updates, so that's a bit of a dud now. Never really got the features that I'd hoped it was going to have through upgrades. And to play ADF games, I have to boot using the Gotek drive instead of the Vampire, whereas to play those WHD load games, I boot the Vampire up, but then of course the keyboard fails. And even then I can't really remember the last time I put a real floppy disk in the external drive to play something that way. I mean, my original teenage disks are kind of treasured and I do try not to wear them out. But then with the Vampire and its FPGA, the RGB to HDMI Raspberry Pi HDMI output, and the Gotek USB drive stuffed into this Amiga, well, is this a real Amiga anymore? But look, I love my Amiga, and I love that it has my original teenage hard disk installation on this compact flash card, restored from those 50 floppy disks I found in my parents' attic, somehow only 2 of which had read errors. But I'd love it so much more if I could still get the visual nostalgia of how Amigas look, and how that mouse feels in your hand, but without all of that extra hassle. And now I think that I can, and that's what we're going to explore and experiment with right now. So we're going to switch it out on the main desk with our A1200 Maxi, and we're going to find out if there's anything that the Maxi can't do that the real Amiga could. And as an added argument for why we should do this anyway, by putting the real one aside in our museum display storage here, we're preserving its capacitors, chips and other parts from wear and tear. And before we have some fun migrating my A500 hard disk to the A1200 Maxi, that preservation brings us to my larger point for this video. Many years ago on a forum I posed the question, what year do you think the last Commodore Amiga will stop working? I mean, it's going to happen at some point, isn't it, if we keep powering them up and wearing them down. So let's use the slightly older Commodore 64 as an example, because as you probably know, several of its rarer chips, such as the 8701, the VIC graphics chip, the SID sound chip, or the PLA chip, the programmable logic array, all now have modern replacements, either designed and seeking manufacturing, or already available, just because those original chips failed so much that they already have become truly rare. And without one, each machine is essentially dead. Now, on one hand, if you replace all of those chips, then does the computer become a sort of ship of Theseus paradox? Or in our case, a chip of Theseus, I guess. Like my Amiga here, is it still the original computer anymore if the main parts have been changed? And on the other hand, as we've already learned recently with worldwide chip shortages, even those new chips can't really be relied upon. We're seeing it right now with Randy Rossi having trouble sourcing FPGAs for his VIC chip replacement, or Sergius Stepankovic who can't find a manufacturer for his new Amiga 1200 keyboard. So what will happen when the last VIC chip from the Commodore 64 fails and there's no modern replacement on the market? Surely the answer to the problem is, at some point, maybe even now, a certain portion of the retro community has to just stop, or at least reduce, using their machines to preserve them. But that doesn't mean we can't use modern recreations of those computers all day, every day instead, with the original sitting nearby, beautifully preserved and on display to enjoy. So that's the point that I'm starting to think about. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we should all be thinking about that. Either way, I'd love to know what you think in the comments below. Well, let's see what Ladyfractic thinks about if we should replace all our retro computers with... Why do you look like that?
Like what?
Ladyfractic, did you... Oh no! What's happened to your face? Oh no, it's happening to everyone. Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Say bye-bye. Good. Then again, there's always recreation Amiga PCBs out there, and you could order yours from PCBWay, starting at just $5. Because as we all know, PCB stands for Poor Commodore's Banished, doesn't it? Well, anyway, now let's take that CF card over to my Macintosh. And yes, this is another modern device that I've dressed up as retro, by the way. And you're starting to see a theme now in my life, aren't you? And what we're going to do is clone the compact flash card into a modern disk image, or .dmg file. So now we can open up UAE, the Amiga emulator, and tell it to boot from that image. A virtual Amiga booting from a virtual disk. Okay, so now we can have the emulator mount a normal Mac folder as an empty second hard disk, so we can copy my teenage system and all of its files and documents to a modern file system. And that's what we're going to use on the A1200 Maxi. I always doubt this, I can't believe that actually worked. Okay, and for the copying, perhaps symbolically, I'm going to use my teenage copy of Directory Opus to essentially clone itself, among other things. Seems fitting. So let's watch it fill up the Macs folder as it works. And with that done, the first of many advantages of this way of doing things is we can much more easily edit the Amiga's startup sequence and other files here. We can also more easily organize the Amiga's files whenever we need to. I'm always tinkering with something or other, so it's nice to be able to do it here. So let's pop our A1200's USB in and copy all those files from the Mac, essentially to the A1200. And there it is, 50 floppies of my full 1990s Amiga setup on a tiny USB drive shaped like one floppy. Now, the moment of truth. Will it boot in the A1200?
All my circuits are functioning perfectly.
I guess he's not functioning perfectly. Way to spoil the moment.
All my circuits are functioning perfectly.
So what you're hearing now is the original audio file that I inserted into my Amiga's user startup sequence back in the 90s, playing back still today to tell us that it is still working perfectly. Well, it's hard to describe how I feel seeing all this. I have so many regrets of selling so much of my old computer stuff, but the fact that I thought to make this backup in 1994 and store it in the attic before I sold my Amiga is just totally priceless to me. And here, 1994 lives on as if it were today, the exact same digital zeros and ones that never get degraded by time. And this magic of why we're able to boot this hard disk in this way is thanks to a newer method of getting Workbench and hard disks working, developed by Jimmy Johansson. Now, instead of using a save state to trick the A500 Mini into booting from a hard disk, it directly modifies the boot file that the A500 Mini used to run its normal WHD load game packages, and it adds into the Mini's config file a link to our hard disk folder on that USB floppy. Now, as you saw a minute ago, I put the Amiga in interlaced mode, but it's pretty flickery as always. However, I've configured the Mini's config file to allow me to press F7 on our real keyboard to access the AmiBerry emulator settings. And in there, let's try some flicker fixing. Now, this may not look different to you because it's a 50Hz TV filmed on a 60Hz camera and then interlaced is doing its own weird things, so I couldn't properly capture it, but trust me, this is not flickering in real life, whereas it was, as I said, migraine-inducing before. And with this non-flickery interlace mode now, I wonder if my old favourite, Wordworth, can display its native high-res mode and its special fonts without flickering for the first time in my life. And yes, I loved this word processor so much as a kid. And I actually used to run it with the flicker present just to enjoy that high-res screen mode. It was the best I could get on my monitor that I had at the time, but it's never looked this good to me. So this, for me, may seem weird, it's just a word processor. This is quite a moment. Well, while we're here, let's have a quick peek through some of my teenage files. There's all sorts here. I mean, it deserves a special episode of its own, I think. There's letters to girlfriends, yes. Stuff from when I worked for the Blue Ribbon Soundworks. Wait, what's this? Oh, yes. Talk about meta. We were saying how Directory Opus cloned itself. Well, in similar fashion, I used my teenage Amiga to sell itself. That's a pretty good price as well. Let me know if you're the one that bought an A500 Plus or a GVP hard disk from Loot magazine back in Kew Gardens, West London in 1994. I'd love to chat. And there's my old high score chart. Let me know if you can beat any of these. Yeah, you probably can. And how about Bars and Pipes itself? So yeah, I was their UK tech support phone line in the mid-90s. Good times explaining to people how to use their M1D1 interface. Yeah, it's MIDI. And here in Deluxe Paint, we can see my call log template from that support hotline. So you can see how I was really using all the aspects of my Amiga for my job at the time, even though I was 18. But it wasn't all work. Of course, here's Batman. Pretty amazing to me that they're still churning out films based on that long after I was in Batman Begins. There I am. And even longer after I painted the Bat logo on D-Paint. Where did all the years go, Robin? Okay, so back to replacing my Amiga. I think it's safe to say that as far as the hard disk goes, it's a big yes, this can replace it. What was on a CF card is now on a USB stick. No huge difference, really. But what about floppies, or at least ADF floppy files converted from real floppies? Well, this is a tool that lets you mount them in Workbench. I downloaded this from Amunet. Alright, it seems to work. I've mounted a floppy disk image in Workbench on the A1200 Maxi.
All my circuits are functioning perfectly.
But I could also hit F7 theoretically, and yeah, mount them here, meaning I can just copy any ADF I want onto that same USB, have the Amiga booted up in moments. Now sure, I could do this with the old Gotek drive in my real Amiga, and remember the point here isn't really whether the new machine is better, just whether it can replace it for everyday usage. And whilst yes it can, in fact it is offering us more options, isn't it? Now, the A500 Mini can already handle WHD load game packages natively, but I wonder if these ones I had on my old hard disk will work anyway. I installed these in the last 5 years or so, I think, into my original hard disk setup. I'm kind of blown away, guys. I'd heard that they didn't work via this method, but yet here they are. They all seem to work. Again, one step simpler, everything in one place. And as this is a newer method of getting Workbench working with tweaked settings, let's see how fast SysInfo thinks this machine is now. Wow, that is quite an upgrade. It's actually off the scale there. Quite an upgrade from the A500, even from how this machine performed when we first built it. I think it was only halfway up the red then. And again, these speed-ups aren't possible on a real Amiga. So yes, not only can this replace my Amiga, but again, it's better. Now in a moment, let's try and get email working on this Amiga. But first, you might want to accelerate your own learning, which makes this a great time to introduce you to ad-free online learning community Skillshare, who are sponsoring this Resabode to inspire discovery through creativity. Now, I think we all have things we wish we knew, but don't really want the rigmarole of joining an online college or such like, which is why I was genuinely surprised by how, in less than a minute, Skillshare had me learning about things I'd always wanted to explore for future YouTube video creation, like this ASCII art class by Harbour Bickmore, in really easy to digest and clearly explained steps. I recommend Skillshare whether you're just looking for personal growth, a class for some relaxation, or to level up your skills for your business or just a side hustle. So invest in yourself and your personal growth by joining Skillshare. The first 1,000 people to use the special link in my description will get a 1-month free trial. You're welcome. Well, finally, let's see if I can at least open my email program, though we have no internet connectivity on this machine yet. Oh, wait, it's giving me an error. Well, the beauty of this method is, again, we can much more easily edit the startup sequence, try and bug fix that. So let me change up a couple of things here that I think could be causing that. And yes, fixed. Oh god, I love it when it just works. Now I am looking into getting internet working, as I hinted. This machine has USB ports, and I have ordered a USB Wi-Fi dongle. Perhaps just some driver tinkering will be needed on the Amiga side. Again, something for a dedicated Resopode in the future. And really, I think modern cable internet is the only thing that this machine can't do that my real A500 could. Though to be fair, even that was a bit of a lucky hack, as originally the Amigas could only do dial-up, and I don't even have a phone line anymore anyway. So whilst it is a fail on that one internet point, did the other advantages make this better than a real Amiga? Well, for one thing, it has USB power instead of that huge power brick. I'm not kidding, that has fallen on my head when I've been under the desk rewiring things. We can obviously fix the interlace flicker, as we showed. That dual HDMI output and that HDMI switch isn't necessary. And of course, no Vampire card needed either. So theoretically, we're stacking up hundreds of dollars of savings there. And that USB mouse feels original and feels nostalgic to me. But as a plus, again, there's no ball to clog, if you know what I mean. And this lovely clicky mechanical keyboard is obviously superior to the original keyboard. The Sergius Stepankiewicz needs help getting these mass-produced. If you can help, reach out to him via email, it's in the description. And finally, our new Amiga is even faster than an Amiga 4000. That said, one other thing this new A1200 can't do is crash really frustratingly with a flashing caps lock. That is such a relief to me. I think I actually have PTSD from it. So yeah, for my needs, this really is a better option as a day-to-day Amiga. But that said, obviously it may not be for everyone. If you need specific graphics cards or anything specific like that, you'd seriously struggle with this. For example, if I installed the Amiga 4000 hard disk images that we saved from that Amiga 4000 that was on the set of Titanic, whilst we could boot it here, I don't think it could ever emulate the PAR video card with its dedicated second monitor output that is needed to actually output that original movie footage that we found.
Titanic.
So yeah, if we're going to go to Hollywood standards again, this is another limitation. But above all of that, I think for me here, the key is keeping life interesting. You have to remember, I make over 50 videos a year, but I still feel a genuine buzz every time I look at the new Amiga. You know, it's really invigorated my interest. It is the ultimate toy with modern parts, yet incredibly still harnessing my teenage workbench setup and the nostalgic look and feel of a real Amiga. You see, I never owned an Amiga 1200, but I often drooled over it. So this is a double whammy for me. But having done all this and said all that, I have a feeling in a few months to maybe a year, I'm going to start to miss the old hardware. I might get bored of how reliable this new one is. So I'll probably end up flip-flopping back and forth. Variety is the spice of life, after all. But don't worry, I'll always fix up machines on this channel. That part is still very rewarding. Maybe if I overuse this one enough, I'll need to repair its motherboard one day. Time to learn how to solder surface mount technology, I guess. But what do you think? Are we entering an age where clone machines start to overtake real vintage hardware? A sort of attack of the clones? Should you preserve your originals from wear and tear in a beautiful display area with reproductions for everyday usage instead? Or despite looking and feeling like the real thing, can a reproduction never recreate the soul of a retro computer? I wonder how you'd solder one of those. Well, either way, thanks so much for watching this Restopode. Subscribe and support below, and cheerio.